That's on background music.
We're going to have quite an interesting time choosing it. The 19th of July. I'm obliged to inform you that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded, and to assist people watching or listening online, can I remind members to identify your name and role before speaking, please. So, item number 1, apologies for absence. We don't have any apologies today. Item number 2, disclosable interests. Councillor Motley? Oh, Councillor Evans?
Thank you, Chairman. On the agenda for today is the Ponsbury recommendation for the neighbourhood plan. I'm a member of that group, so I may make a statement, but then I will retire to the audience whilst it's discussed. It is non-pecuniary, but it is. I am a member of it.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Thank you, Councillor Evans. We'll note that. Councillor Motley?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I have an interest in item 12, the local plan, and I will withdraw at that point. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, and we will remember to come and get you when that item is finished.
That would be fine. Thank you.
Item number 3 is to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 7th of June 2023. I'm happy to propose those minutes. Do I have a seconder?
Councillor Nellens, I'll second.
Thank you very much indeed. Item number 4, public question time. We have one question from Dr. Alison Caffin, and that will be read by Tim Collard. Tim?
Yes, the question is this. In light of the Footbridge Farm applicant now not pursuing a judicial review, I am resubmitting my question from June's Cabinet with certain clarifications, which I hope can now be addressed fully. How will the Council, its planning and regulatory services departments, ecologists and specialist consultees take into account the recent ruling of the planning inspector into the Footbridge Farm intensive poultry unit planning appeal at Towsley Bridge North? In particular, how will they in future implement the inspector's conclusion that the odour and air quality modelling by AS Modelling and Data, which has been and continues to be used to support many IPU applications across the county, cannot be relied upon?
Thank you, Tim. And the answer is going to be provided by Councillor Rob Macy.
Thank you, Leader. The technical assessments which form part of poultry applications are carefully assessed by our specialist consultees as part of the planning process. In terms of other applications we are dealing with, the consultees will continue to look at the suitability of the methodology used in the assessments to ensure that they are robust and appropriate. This will take account of the inspector's decision on Footbridge Farm and other relevant guidance.
Thank you, Councillor Macy. Moving on to agenda item number 5, which is members' question time. We have no members' questions today. Item number 6 is scrutiny items, and I don't think we have scrutiny items today. Those will come later as the new structures kick into action. Item number 7, aligning our customer services and drive to digital, presented by Councillor Rob Macy.
Thank you, Leader. The report in front of you proposes to change the opening hours for more general service calls into our customer service centre. These are the calls for simpler service requests such as waste, highways and planning that many people could do another way via our website and other channels. I stress this does not affect the times for the first point of contact for adults and children's social work, homelessness or local welfare fund, nor does it affect contacts that might require an emergency response out of hours, such as urgent highways issues. These will continue as normal. Customer service centre opening times were last reviewed many years ago and still reflect more historic levels of contact. Since that last review, our online offer has improved considerably and customer habits have also changed. There is a general downward trend in these calls. There is also a very established pattern of calls over a working day and very few calls now received early in the morning, later on into the afternoon or on a Saturday. We need to reflect this in our opening times. We know from research that doing things online helps to reduce the cost of handling these transactions significantly. For example, a phone call costs nearly £3 to us, whereas an online transaction is about 15 pence. Encouraging residents to transact with us online is important. It supports our council's digital strategy as presented to Cabinet on the 15th of February. However, it's not simply about saving money. This is about freeing up customer service advisors to take much more proactive outbound calls, such as those that we saw during the COVID pandemic, to residents who may be finding it more difficult to cope. If we can use the resources we have at no additional cost to the taxpayer to make more preventative outbound contact to the right residents at the right time, we can stop people falling into crisis situations, which can otherwise absorb far more time and resources from the council and the NHS system locally. This is a good example of our Shropshire Plan in action, a healthy organisation focusing its efforts on support for those most in need to have healthy lives. A public consultation on these changes invited responses via a number of different channels, including online, via a helpline, face-to-face via Shropshire Local and our libraries, with promotion through social media, radio and press coverage, voluntary and housing sector stakeholders, and directly to customers when they contacted us. I think you can see from the range of ways which we conducted the public consultation, the public do have a number of ways to get in touch with us and take part and to access services. We are confident also that at least 25,000 customers who made contact with us were directly informed and invited to respond. As a result, 381 comments were received. Whilst there's no clear majority for any one option, most respondents chose an option that meant change. 44% presented their own ideas, many suggesting that we keep things as they are, others taking that we cater for working people by remaining open late. The report details quite clearly that those parts of the day when we receive most calls and those other parts of the day where demand is visibly far less. And whilst remaining the same in response to changing call patterns would be uneconomical, we have listened to residents who asked for an element of late opening. And as a result, we propose to keep one day as late opening whilst we measure any additional demand. I think at that point, I just want to make the point of people say that we do consultations and we never take into account what's coming back from them or incorporate their ideas. In this case, we have listened. We have kept some late night opening and we will monitor that. And I've taken the time to go through all the responses that we received to that consultation so I could understand them before my discussions with officers. So therefore, we think that what is being proposed through the review is the best compromise between encouraging more people to do business with the council online, whilst continuing to provide telephone service across those times of the day when we know most people choose to call us, so that those unable to go online are not excluded, and freeing up enough hours for our staff at the right time of day to devote to making much more proactive contact with those who may need some extra support. The report itself explains about the rationale behind the recommendation for new opening times, and the appendices show more about the volumes of calls across a working day and a working week that support the change to these new hours. The report therefore seeks a recommendation to amend the opening time of the customer service centre for the reasons given, including a trial of late night opening.
Councillor Macy, do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Glenn Butler.
Thank you, Leader. Before I second it, I would just like, for transparency and clarity, make a slight amendment to recommendation 3.2 in respect of the trial. After the existing statement, just to add, the trial should start on or after the 21st of August, because I am aware that obviously we're going into the holiday period, and I believe other parts of the reform are starting on that date. And by the 21st of August, we will be getting calls for people regarding children going back to school. So if I can make that amendment, please. So just to add, the trial to begin on or after the 21st of August for monitoring purposes. And I formally second. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I think it's also worth pointing out that there was a significant discussion around this report at Cabinet, informal Cabinet. And one of the things that Councillor Macy will be doing is actually bringing back at some point, or reporting at some point, on the outcomes following those outgoing calls. Because I think we know or I don't say we know through hearsay, but we do hear lots of really good stories coming back about how the calls out are making a difference to people. And I myself have been contacted by a number of residents who are very grateful for those calls. But I think Councillor Macy is very keen to actually show the outcomes and outputs, if you like, in a different way. So that will be done. Thank you. Councillor Evans?
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, yes, the outgoing calls are valued, and I think it's been referred to earlier how much it's valued and the number of outgoing calls it actually make. But for the report, and I note what was said about taking note of the consultation. If one looks at the consultation, I estimate around about 23% of those 381 who replied are actually asking for longer hours. If you look at it, the other that's in there and take the 66% of the 44% comes to around about 20% or something like that. I would think so. The consultation showed that the residents who actually replied wanted more than less. And if one looks at the report itself in Appendix 1 on Table 1, it shows that there's 170 calls per day would be affected by closing it at 3 p.m. So I am surprised it is going ahead. I don't think it should go ahead. There are a large number of residents who still want to contact and talk to a human being rather than use the internet. A number do not have smartphones. They cannot use the internet on their phones. Their broadband at home is not very good. There is that conversation that is needed. I'm also getting complaints about the wait that sometimes occurs when people ring up the customer helpline. And if we are saying that those 170 calls will now take place during the day, will extra resources be put in to answer the telephones during the peak times? There's a reference about using those to make outgoing calls and for other duties, but are we anticipating a larger volume per hour during the reduced opening times? But I am surprised it's going ahead. I would not be supporting this if I was a cabinet member.
Thank you, Councillor Evans, but you're not. Moving on. Councillor Evans.
Thank you. And just to support the comments from Councillor Evans, I remain very concerned about the impacts of this proposal. The report itself states that we have in Shropshire a very high level of digitally excluded residents, unusually high at 25%. That's over 88,000 residents who will not be able to access your digital services. And I think we have to consider those because they also pay council tax. The services that you describe that will mainly be digitised are waste planning. These are often the first contact taxpayers have with the council. And I think we need to consider the reputational damage of people paying council tax, wanting to have a contact with the organisation they pay into and not being able to make that call. And finally, I'm particularly concerned about what will happen to people who are now channeled into email instead of phone calls, because we hear from many constituents that when they do email the council, they don't always get a reply. There is supposed to be a 5-day protocol for officers to respond to constituents. I hope that that will now be respected and upheld. I know officers are under a huge amount of pressure. The capacity has been wound down in this organisation because of so many years of austerity cuts. If I can keep to my final point, which is I'm not really sure of the value of this exercise. The report states that you have a high level potential saving of 1.1 million. But in the usual way of this administration, while you're worrying about the high level potential, you then admit the actual cost reduction to the authority 93,000, so less than a tenth of the estimated saving. So can we please consider the impact on residents and reputation to this council to save a few peanuts?
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. I'm sure Councillor Macy will point this out, but can I just make it very clear that we are not closing customer services? Customer services is still open every day of the week. You make it sound, both you and, well, the data, if you look at the data, The number of calls this council receives on a Saturday is minimal, hence why we've gone with a late night opening. Both you and Councillor Evans are trying to make out that we are closing customer services. We are absolutely not. Councillor Macy, did you want to come back?
Yeah, I think it's making that point. We're not saying that we're turning off the customer service centre. People will still be able to get in touch with us over the phone. As we say, a great number of the other services and the more urgent services won't be affected at all by these changes. In terms of the other routes that we provide for people to get in touch with us, absolutely, that's part of the council's commitment as we continue to improve those. It should be a good experience whenever you contact the council, however you decide to do so, and that's what we're driving towards. This is just one of the ways that we can use our resources slightly differently, and as we say, as Roger said, in terms of the value of the outbound calls as well, so it's adding value in that respect. Typically in response to the Saturday bit, if you look at the graph, I mean, that's the only bit, I think it's 1% or under 1% of the calls we receive were on a Saturday. Those are the discussions I've had with officers in response to that's why we're opening in an evening during the week, because that's when we receive a high volume of calls. So from that, I would hope that we continue to improve the experience that people can get in touch with us. You heard all the ways that we actually advertise the consultation to people through Shropshire Local and other things, as well as online through social media and so on. That work will continue. But for residents, this is still available as a service to them and an option. And we'll continue to review information as we go along. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Macy. Councillor Dean.
Thank you, Chair. It's incredibly depressing that today we've got two reports, both of which will reduce services to some of the most vulnerable in our community. My specific point on this report is really how confident are you in terms of actually realising any of these savings? We've got the proposal that the staff will be shifted towards making outgoing calls, which I do understand are really vital and useful to those people, but it says that the savings will be realised because those outgoing calls will realise some grant income. So it'd be interesting to hear what the evidence is for that, and how confident you are in that. And the second point is just in terms of the overall figure. So we're being told that this is all based on a 2012 report, in other words, more than 10 years old, about the costs, the potential cost savings. Both Councillor Evans and myself couldn't actually find that report, but what you do find when you search for it is a whole series of reports which say that how inefficient sometimes these channel shifts, as that's called, shifting towards online transactions, how inefficient those things are sometimes carried out. And so realising those savings, that just seems to be a more than 10-year-old figure being plucked out of thin air, which I don't have any confidence in. So overall, it feels like we're making savings which are hitting the vulnerable, and I don't have a high degree of confidence that these savings will be realised anyway.
Thank you, Councillor Dean. Councillor Macy.
I think in terms of reducing access to the vulnerable, I mean, the outbound calls are very much targeted at specific groups, including those. We have a digital skills programme which we've had underway that plans to expand that as well. There are other partners we work with through the Social Task Force on digital inclusion and things like that. So that's where we're looking on those ones. In terms of the savings within this, obviously, those are the savings that have been proposed. They've been calculated by the officers as to what we are looking at with these. Obviously, there's a slight knock-on impact by actually listening to people in the consultation and opening for those later hours one day a week. But we would rather listen to them and make that change rather than just be driven along this route. And as we've said, it's not just about the saving money. It's moving to where people are and so on, and making sure our resources are in the right place and we're responding in the right way. So,
Councillor Macy, final point, Councillor Evans, if you wanted to come back.
Councillor Dean made the point I was going to make, Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, I have a proposer. And I have a seconder. All those in favour? Thank you very much indeed. Moving on to item number 8, which is the permission to consult on the removal of discretionary areas of school and college transport assistance. Councillor Kirsty Hurst-Knight.
Thank you, Councillor Kirsty Hurst-Knight. I'm the portfolio holder for Children and Education. The purpose of this report is to seek permission to consult on the removal of all discretionary provision, other than in exceptional circumstances, of home to school transport. This is nursery and post-16 SEND and mainstream post-16 students. Background on the report will show you there's significant increase in costs across the county for the travel to school transport sector, and in particular in the SEND area. A number of local authorities will be doing the same process. Significant increases in the number of requests for EHCP plans, and therefore increasing in the number in young people eligible for transport assistance. Should Cabinet agree to this consultation, and I repeat the word consultation, the Council would undertake an 8-week consultation programme during September and October 2023, and this has been done specifically to avoid school holidays. Across the range of stakeholders, including but not limited to parent carer groups, colleges, schools, parish and town councils, eligible students can also use their bursary payments to support transport costs, plus any college bursaries that are allocated at their discretion. Any changes to the current policy would come into effect from the 1st of September 2024 and therefore will be applicable to new applicants only. As with previous practice, the proposed removal of provision will be on a phased approach, protecting all those pupils and students entitled within the existing schemes for a fixed period of time. Just like to repeat there, at this stage, no decisions have been made, and we will bring back to Cabinet the outcome of the consultations along with any recommendations. So therefore propose that we accept the recommendations as laid out in the report, that we authorise the consultation process as set out in section 2, and that we expect a future report setting out the outcome and recommendations from the consultation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hurst-Knight. Do I have a seconder for that report?
Councillor Ian Nellens, portfolio holder for climate change, the environment and transport. I'll second.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman. You may not be surprised. I do not support this. I'm amazed that it's coming here in these times of cost of living increases, where many families are having to make choices, hard choices. And those families who are now carers for children with disabilities are now being faced with more costs. Schools may well have to pick up this cost, because I listened to the report on Radio Shropshire this morning about that this may well be transferred to the high needs block from schools where parents could actually apply to do it. I am amazed that the council is doing it. I was told at a meeting last week that the council has up to £37.1 million in general reserves to use this year to help it through. It's not going to come into force until September 24. Can I say that in May 25, if I have anything to do with it, it would be cancelled. So why do a consultation when it's not going to come in for another 15 months from now? Is it 12, 14 months from now? Create all that uncertainty, all that concern that many parents who are doing their best for their children have. Grant Thornton is reporting other things, and it is subject to a judicial review, as it says in the health thing. Then it could be challenged. And I note in the report where it says in the health one, the projected action would also potentially be seen as running against the corporate aims of the council. Please withdraw it.
Councillor Evans, Councillor Buckley.
I couldn't agree more. I think you have an opportunity today to reconsider your actions on this proposal. It's absolutely shameful. So in a rural county where access to education depends on transport, you want to save an absolute pitiful amount of money by withdrawing transport to those who are either on low income or who have special needs. You could not have picked any more vulnerable people at this point in time to remove from them the wherewithal to access education. I hope that you are ashamed of what you are trying to do. When you look at the report, the actual net saving is £350,000. You are spending £1 million every year on paying consultants on telling you how to save money. So you could straight away avoid this particular proposal. I'm delighted to see a very thorough equalities assessment. I'm often the person arguing that we should have an equalities assessment, and I'm absolutely delighted with the quality of the assessment that has been written to advise you before you take your decision today. And in case you haven't read it thoroughly, I'd like to read out a couple of lines from it.
We are consulting. We have made, we've done it before, we've done it twice before, right? We have not made any decision. What you are actually saying is we have made a decision. We have not. I made a promise at the 2nd of March council meeting that every statutory thing that we did, sorry, non-statutory thing that we have to do, or don't have to do rather, will be looked at. This is one of them. We are asking for permission to consult today. We have not made any decision. And before you start all the, you should be ashamed of yourselves, there isn't one member around this table who doesn't take this decision to consult.
I'm pleased to hear it, because it is a political choice to save this money from these vulnerable people while spending £1 million on consultants. Let me just read you the line from your own officer.
Point of order, Leader. Point of order, Leader. Councillor Buckley has just directly ignored the point that you made about this being a consultation, and has once again stated that we'll be saving this money, which you've just pointed out is not the case because this is a consultation.
Thank you. So the line from your own equalities officer asks whether the proposal will have a direct impact on an individual's health, mental health and well-being. And they say it will be at best medium negative and could be viewed as high negative.
We haven't decided anything, Councillor Buckley. You are now predetermining the outcome of a formal consultation. You've just heard from the last agenda item, we consult, we listen. Can we allow Cabinet to make the decision to consult? Then we will be talking to the right people, gaining their views, as other local authorities are doing, including some of your own. So please do not predetermine the outcome of this consultation. This is what we are doing, and we need to be allowed to get on with it. You can politically mislead, which is actually what is damaging. So please, Cabinet, there are the recommendations I put forward. Thank you.
It is a recommendation, and you are putting forward a proposal
through the chair.
Through the chair. Thank you, Chairman. It is a proposal. You are asking people to look at your proposal to cut this service. And I'm just drawing your attention to your equalities officer, who is saying this is medium negative and could be high negative with regard to child development, education, independence and employment opportunities.
Yeah,
I am quoting a specialist officer. Please heed their advice and change your decision today.
We are well aware of the equalities assessment, because we wanted to make sure it was extremely robust. So we are well aware of that. This is a permission to consult. No decision has been made. And if you go back on the 2 occasions that we've looked at this before in previous administrations, minor changes, I believe, were made at that point. So there is no history to this. We are asking once again for permission to consult, because every single item that we are looking at that is non-statutory has to be dealt with. What I find really interesting is that the County Council Network are doing a major piece of work on this at the moment, because this is impacting on every single council up and down the land. And what is coming out of it that is really interesting, and I'm quite happy to say this, is that one of the real anomalies is that we have children having to stay in education until 18, or young people staying in education until 18, but actually the transport doesn't match that. And that is being lobbied through government. The other thing that we're trying to do, which, Councillor, I'm sorry, Kirsty, if I'm stealing your thunder, but in some of these cases, the reason we've only got, I think it's 6 nursery children at the moment, is because actually we're trying to provide those facilities much closer to home, because we don't want children travelling. The thought of putting a nursery-age child with severe needs in a taxi all the way to Sevendale, by the time they get there and get everything sorted, they're probably just going home again. There are better ways of dealing with this. We are, I think you just latch on to something that says, you're taking this money away when actually we're still trying to improve outcomes for people. And this, I say it again, is a permission to consult. And listening to the lady on the radio this morning, Zara, when we talk about co-producing, absolutely. We work very closely with that organisation. So, there is no predetermination of this this consultation whatsoever. Councillor Dean.
Thank you, Chair. So this is seeking permission to consult on a policy which is going to severely impact some of the most vulnerable people in our community, and 3 members of the cabinet tried to prevent a member of the opposition from simply drawing your attention and drawing the public's attention to that part of the report. That the equalities report makes it absolutely clear that there is a risk of a high negative impact on protected characteristics groupings. In other words, we are looking at a proposal which you are consulting on. So the proposal has come from somewhere. It's come from your administration to consult on something which is going to embed inequality. It's going to make the situation even worse for some of the most vulnerable in our society. And it is really concerning that when that is brought to your attention, 3 members of the cabinet make an effort to close down that attempt simply to make this absolutely clear, to get it on the table, to get it in front of the public, that is the impact that this would result in. Embedding inequality, making life even tougher for families who are trying to get up on the ladder in terms of skills development for those post-16 people who are already struggling to find decent work, and to help those families who have very young children with severe difficulties to make sure that they are able to access all sorts of life opportunities by making use of nursery provision. That's all we're doing here, is bringing to everybody's attention the potential impact, and it is concerning that was being closed down.
Come in. Nobody is trying to close that down. What I'm saying is, please don't mislead the public into thinking that a decision has been made to do it. It has not. That's all I'm saying. Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Leader. Just a couple of comments first. The wording I'd like to use is, and it constantly coming up as through the Shropshire Plan and getting it right and getting leadership right, is the fact we've always done something one way does not give us a mandate to continue doing it in the future. So I'd like people to take that on board. Secondly, this is a consultation, it is not a decision. Now, when the opposition are talking about the £1 million for the consultants, that is the maximum budget for the consultants if they deliver the transformation and the efficiencies and the savings for us to actually deliver our defined budgets over the future years. So it is not a clear, they haven't had £1 million, they've had nowhere near it, and they will not if they don't deliver. So taking that aside, as this is a consultation and they are not happy with it, during that consultation period, they are more than welcome to put forward where they will find the £350,000 worth of alternative savings that we need to make, as was instructed in the MTFS that went to council in early March. So as part of that consultation, we look forward to that, but take on one side, not using the budget for the consultants, because that is part of our Shropshire Plan, getting it right and getting leadership right. I look forward to seeing that within the consultation period, and then the Cabinet can make their own views where the opposition would make their cuts, because if they did cut it out of the consultants, that would only last for 3 years, which isn't a long time. Where does the revenue come from thereafter, plus inflation? Yeah, we can't be shortism on this. We have to transform this council into a modern, efficient, sustainable council for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll start that again. I'll bring you back in now, Kirsty. Thank you. Councillor Hurst-Knight.
So I think we've established this is just a consultation, and we will absolutely speak to the right people and get their thoughts. I'm the chair on the SEND Strategic Board, and I know you've alluded to it, Leader, the co-production and the work that we've done with that community has been excellent, and we are listening to them. We are trying to promote independence, and we are focusing our resources to the vulnerable. So to be shouted at and called shameful, I don't really accept, and I do take offence at. We are working exceptionally hard, as we've said, and David Short here and James, at making sure children are educated locally, and we know the value in that, and we are leading every possible resource to that long-term project, but more to come back to Cabinet soon. So I think if we could look at this again, there's the recommendations. We will go out to consultation, avoid the school holidays, and speak to the right people from September onwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hurst-Knight. I have a proposer, I have a seconder. All those in favour? Thank you very much indeed. Moving on to item number 9, which is the proposed amendment and or extension of Shrewsbury Town Centre Public Spaces Protection Order number 1, 2017. Councillor Dean Carroll.
Thank you very much, Leader. A little bit of deja vu. Remember bringing this forward in 2017 and in 2020, and I thought I'd see it in the back of it, but apparently not for the day. The consultation responses that have been received are all attached in the appendices. They're also summarised in the report. There's been 100% support from all respondents, whether that be residents, visitors, or businesses or workers in the town centre, to continuing and strengthening the public space protection order. We saw in the years prior to its introduction significant issues in Shrewsbury Town Centre with antisocial behaviour, and at that point in time there were no robust mechanisms with which that could be challenged and dealt with. The Public Space Protection Order has provided those robust mechanisms for challenging and tackling that behaviour. The reports do outline that antisocial behaviour or reported incidents have continued to climb, and that is why we're making additions to the Public Space Protection Order to increase the range of people able to enforce, to make sure that there are more people available and more people on the ground who are able to take that action, and also to include some more specific incidents that are causing problems in Shrewsbury Town Centre, such as sitting and lying in doorways, fire escapes and footpaths, which do account for a significant amount of the reported antisocial behaviour and activity that is trying to be addressed. So in addition to extending it, we're also increasing the breadth of the order and the resource that we have available for enforcement. The police are supportive of it, the BID are supportive of it, the Environmental Health Agency are supportive of it, and there have been no objections from statutory organisations or from the local community in opposition to it. There are recommendations listed as 3.1, 3.2, 3.3 and 3.4. The original order is also attached as Appendix A. I move the recommendations, and between myself and officers we'll try to address any questions that come forward.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Do I have a seconder for that?
Yeah, happy to second. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Motley. Councillor Dean.
Thank you. So the existing order provisions listed under 2.5, I quite understand, and I don't have a problem with those. But I do have a concern that there is a sort of control creep in the additional provisions in this order. So, for example, we're now being told that that we're going to be looking at dealing with people who are sitting or lying on footpaths or pedestrian areas. So I just want to challenge this a little bit. It seems to me that there is a risk of defining annoying teenage behaviour as antisocial behaviour which needs to be stopped, and I think that's a dangerous line to start crossing. So I have real concerns about that, and I also have a concern about point 3, where a person is using a device intended to amplify sound. That is very vague. I know of one person who wanders around the town pushing an amplified device, who has clear mental health difficulties. Everybody's used to him. Nobody gets that annoyed. And I really hope that we're not going to have untrained additional personnel who are being now brought into the picture, trying to address that as some sort of an antisocial behaviour issue. It isn't. It's just somebody who has behaviour which is outside the norm. And let's please be clear that behaviour that is outside the norm is not by itself antisocial. So I do have concerns that we are going into areas where we are going to be trying to control behaviour which really shouldn't be controlled. And finally, you know, the idea that we are now authorising further people to take control to take measures in this field, in part it's because the police don't want to. So we have to be absolutely confident that those new people taking measures in this area have really good training, know how to deal with these issues sensitively, and don't, you know, become effectively bullies of behaviour in public places. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dean. I think we would all say that certainly in Shrewsbury Town Centre, since these the town wardens, is that what they're called? Yeah, have been in. Yeah, rangers, that's right, have been in place. There is a much better atmosphere in the town centre, and I know from both sides that actually the town rangers deal with situations extremely well. I think there is always a significant amount of judgment required, isn't there, when we have legislation like this? But if the legislation isn't there to start with, so for the gentleman you talk about, that's not what this is probably aimed at. But if you've got a group of people, and I've seen it myself, where they are playing extremely loud music in a situation, if you haven't got that legislation, you can't deal with it. That doesn't mean to say that you deal with the gentleman that you mentioned. So I take your point, and I'll bring Councillor Carroll and Councillor Buckley in a moment. But I think, you know, if the legislation isn't in place, it's really difficult to deal with it. If it's there, you have a certain amount of common sense involved. Councillor Carroll?
Thank you.
Councillor Buckley, Councillor Thurston.
If I can come back, because I think it is some important points that Councillor Dean has raised, and if I can try and offer some reassurance, some explanation, and some additional information. In terms of the points that you raise in 2.6, the additional elements that will be encompassed within the PSPO, what I would caution is not to read a bullet point in isolation, but to read it in combination with the rest of 2.6. So together with 3 new provisions that would enable an authorised officer to tackle additional specific behaviours that are causing nuisance, alarm, harassment or distress under the following circumstances. So it's not saying everybody who's using a device for amplifying sound. It's saying somebody who's using a device for amplifying sound that is causing nuisance, alarm, harassment or distress. So that is not seeking to penalise everybody that uses a device for amplifying sound for perfectly legitimate reasons, but only those that are causing nuisance, alarm, harassment and distress. In terms of widening the scope of people able to take enforcement action, anybody taking enforcement action will, by necessity, need to receive training in that. But we're not necessarily saying that any member of staff that happens to be, what we're not saying is any member of staff that happens to be on their lunch break walking through Shrewsbury Town Centre will be expected to suddenly take on the role of an enforcement officer. At the moment, there's a very narrow list of people who can take enforcement action. Perhaps too narrow. Even the town rangers aren't currently able to take enforcement action, and they've actually asked in their consultation response if we would consider granting authorisation for them to be able to enforce public space protection orders. So we won't be talking about a huge, vast, unwieldy group of vigilantes taking the law into their own hands. We'll be talking about increasing the number of people from a tiny number to a still relatively small number of trained individuals with specific responsibility for enforcing the public space protection order. We've seen in all of the appendices of supporting information, not just the importance of the current measures that have been in place, but also the 3 additional measures. There is particularly the first bullet point around people obstructing footpaths fire escapes and doorways. We've seen plenty of supporting evidence in the appendices from business owners and property managers of the impact of people obstructing the transgress and egress of people in and out of properties, whether they be commercial properties, residential, or civic and public properties. And that cannot be right and cannot be acceptable. They are quite clearly causing nuisance, alarm, harassment, or distress by those actions, and they are having real world impacts in Shrewsbury Town Centre to the businesses, to the workforce, to the residents of Shrewsbury and Shropshire going in to visit the town to go about their business, and to tourists and visitors, the lifeblood of so much of the economy of Shrewsbury Town Centre. I think that these measures, these additional measures, are entirely proportionate, responsible and appropriate for dealing with these challenges, and I stand by them.
Councillor Carroll, Councillor Hurst-Knight, then Councillor Buckley.
Yeah, it was just to give you some reassurance, Councillor Dean, about the intensive work that our detached youth team have done with young people in that area. A lot of consequential thinking, just how things might appear, and just to give you a commitment that work continues. Happy to talk to you about the work that they've done in that area outside this meeting, but that work absolutely continues with the young people there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hurst-Knight. Councillor Buckley.
Thank you. Actually, the last two interventions have been really welcome. I really welcome the suggested nuanced approach about how to enforce these provisions. And I'm particularly keen to hear Kirsty Hurst-Knight refer to the detached youth team, because what we're looking at here is a balance, isn't it, between protecting the public so they don't feel intimidated, that they can enjoy the town centre in safety, whilst also understanding that people causing this antisocial behaviour are themselves vulnerable and in need of some assistance. And what we've seen over the last 4 years, as mental health services and substance abuse services have been cut by half, we've seen a gradual increase in this antisocial behaviour. And what I would hope is that we continue to reach out. And I noted in reference to those support agencies, which is vital. But the area I'm most concerned about is our young people. So now we're going into the summer holidays. Young people will be out and about more, and they'll be in high spirits. And that's, as Councillor Dean says, to be welcomed. However, there's also a safeguarding concern. And I've had reports through from some of the Shrewsbury councillors of younger people asking rough sleepers to buy alcohol. So there's a licensing concern there. There's a safeguarding concern there. And we absolutely need that detached youth work team that Councillor Hurst-Knight referred to. We absolutely need them to be involved, absolutely front and centre out there, to ensure that, particularly the next 2 months, that really moves up a gear to protect those young people. And ultimately, we need to put some funding back into those support services so that people who are vulnerable have got somewhere safe to go, rather than being in the high street causing a nuisance to others.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Councillor Motley.
Yeah, thanks. I would just like to draw everybody's attention to items 414 and 415. Because our reset team is doing a fantastic job working with vulnerable homeless people and rough sleepers across the county, but particularly in Shrewsbury. They're very much aware of the problems there. I think that, combined with the youth work team, with a bit of luck and lots of support, will hopefully help keep the temperature down over the summer. These multi-agency services are really working very hard on all this, and particularly bearing in mind the fact that there have been particular problems with drugs as well as alcohol. And so I would it's really just to add some reassurance that we have got a lot of people who are really concentrating on this.
Thank you, Councillor Motley. Councillor Dean, just come back to you one more time.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the discussion, actually. And I am somewhat reassured, but I just want to really repeat a couple of points because I think it's worthwhile. So the first is, public space is not commercial space. Public space is about people having the freedom to be there. They don't have to be spending money to be in the town centre. I just think we have to recognise that there are all sorts of roles for public space. And the second is, it does worry me how quickly the phrase antisocial behaviour trips up the tongue sometimes. I'm just as guilty of it as others. We do need to think about what that actually means. Nuisance, alarm, harassment or distress are incredibly subjective terms. And I just think that we have to be careful that we don't start defining antisocial behaviour as something which is just not what we would do.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Dean. And I don't disagree with you actually about the antisocial behaviour thing, because somebody actually pointed out to me only at the weekend that there was some antisocial behaviour going on in the square in Shrewsbury. When I looked, actually there was about 4 or 5 lads sitting playing a guitar. You say, is it something we would do? I quite fancy joining them, actually, to be honest. It looked extremely nice, although they were slightly soggy. But no, I totally take your point that actually the antisocial behaviour thing is very subjective. But as I said, this is there to put it into the legislation, if you like, and then it's how it's dealt with is the issue. So, sorry, Dean, did you want to come back?
Yes, please. Coming back to initially something that Councillor Buckley's raised, is we are aware of those incidents and the issue that you've raised around minors approaching rough sleepers to procure alcohol for them. We're aware, the police are aware, but I would still like to emphasise, if you, any of your colleagues or anybody else that anybody's aware of, witnesses who is aware of these incidents, do please report them both to the licensing authority and to the police, because those are serious matters. In terms of the impact this may have on young people, absolutely, as Councillor Hurst-Knight has said, the detached youth work team are making every effort to reach out and to be everywhere at all times as far as is possible. In terms of this policy, young people will always be young people, and there's nothing wrong with young people enjoying Shrewsbury Town Centre as long as they're not harming anybody else. Age is no excuse to be carrying out some of the behaviours that are listed in the Public Space Protection Order specifically. So I have been young. We've all been young once, some of us more recently than others. I will point that out. And we've all engaged in high-spirited, youthful behaviour that doesn't fall into any of these categories. However, there are some young people as well, and maybe some of us around this table were among them at the time, who did engage in some of the behaviours that are listed. I point out I was not, leader. I was not, as you look at me. But just because somebody is below the age of 18 doesn't mean that that behaviour is acceptable if it's impacting on other people. But it's not a free pass. Yes, the approach and the response to that has to be different, but it's not a free pass for that kind of behaviour. And coming back to Councillor Dean, yes, I do understand your point and where you're going to with that. Of course, we would all like to live in a world where everybody gets on with everybody else. That isn't the reality. We have to trust in the people that we ask to enforce the PSPO, in the same way that we have to trust in the police when they're responding to any report of criminal activity, to use judgment, and that's where the training comes in, to use judgment as to whether the threshold for that activity has been met and what the appropriate sanction is, whether that is confiscating alcohol, whether that's asking somebody to leave Shrewsbury Town Centre, whether that's issuing somebody with a fixed penalty notice. There's not one single measure that is taken in isolation as a sledgehammer, but we have to trust the people that we ask and empower to enforce the PSPO, that they will make the right proportionate and appropriate decisions. And if there are instances where that isn't the case, then we need to hold our hands up and we need to look at why that wasn't the case, and whether that's a lack of refinement in wording or an absence of training or a misunderstanding, and we just need to make sure we do better next time. But I am confident that the enforcement action that's been taken previously shows that we have not been overly heavy-handed with people who are not causing genuine issues and distress in Shrewsbury Town Centre. And what I would say, yes, absolutely, public space is there to be enjoyed by everybody and is not commercial space. However, without a commercially vibrant town centre, there isn't a publicly enjoyable town centre either. Go to towns where there are very little shops, very little retail, very few restaurants, very few coffee shops. They're also not enjoyable places for people to spend time regardless of their intentions to spend money. So the commercial viability of the town centre does go hand in hand with the pleasantness of it as a place for people to enjoy regardless of their intentions to spend money.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Last comment, Councillor Roger Evans.
Thank you, Chairman. It was just to join in the discussion. Yes, we all want people to, residents and tourists, to visit our Shrewsbury town and to feel safe and to be able to enjoy what we offer to everybody. So, yeah, support this. And I think it needs to be universally supported.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. I have a proposer. I have a seconder. All those in favour? Thank you very much indeed. Dean, if you'd like to convey that to the bid, etc., and to the Town Council, that would be very good. So moving on to item number 10, which is the recommendation for Pontesbury Neighbourhood Plan to proceed to referendum. I'm going to present this item. This report is seeking arrangement that, subject to the identified modifications summarised within the independent examiner's report, the Pontesbury Neighbourhood Plan meets the basic conditions and all other legal agreements. My computer is playing up, so I do apologise. It's also seeking approval to undertake a local referendum on the Pontesbury Neighbourhood Plan. I think neighbourhood plans are certainly going to be the way forward. I appreciate Councillor Robbins is going to want to speak about this. We've also got Councillor Nick Hignett online. I know that there has been significant work undertaken on this, and the one thing that I certainly do want to say is that, you know, the council officers have liaised with Pontesbury Parish Council on this referendum version of the neighbourhood plan, and the relationship has been really good, and actually, you know, we really thank the work that Pontesbury have put into this. So I'll let Councillor Evans speak first, and then he can go and sit in a chair over the other side of the room, and I'll bring in Councillor Nick Hignett. Thank you, Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chairman. I was going to speak on behalf of Councillor Hignett, but welcome. But yeah, this area is represented by two Shropshire councillors. We work together, we support this, and that's all I really have to say is please support it. We do need it and we want it.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Councillor Nick Hignett.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for allowing me a couple of minutes to speak on Pontesbury Neighbourhood Plan. 5 neighbourhood plans have already been adopted in the county, and I'm confident that this will be the 6th, illustrating that Pontesbury Parish Council is very proactive and forward-looking. Pontesbury Village is very large, especially when you include the settlements under its control, namely Pontisford, Plearley, Crocton, Asterley and Haberley. And there has been significant new development in the parish over the last few years, and this is continuing to the present day with over 65 new properties presently being built in this area. When I ask newcomers why they chose to move to Pontesbury, they invariably suggest that it's more of a mini town, really, with primary, secondary schools, food retailers, cafes, restaurant, garage, medical practice, dentist, and a parish council community hub with a library and a police office. All that being said, Pontesbury is a very desirable place to live, and it is important that future development is controlled and is right for this area. Both the existing and revised Shropshire local plans emphasise the importance of new development, enhancing the character, appearance and historic interest of the county's settlements and countryside. The external examiner agrees that the overall approach of Pontesbury Parish Neighbourhood Plan focuses on retaining the area's character whilst improving employment, opportunities, leisure and community infrastructure. In providing details about the character of Ponsonby Village and Parish, the neighbourhood plan provides essential information against which planning applications can be judged regarding potential impact on the local character. That's enough said, really, so I just ask Cabinet to please support the document and refer it to full council for adoption.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hignett. If I didn't know better, I'd say that that was a bid for a market town status there, wasn't it, Nick? But absolutely, and I think we hear that a lot from people around the area, and it is almost a mini town. And the community hub, I have to say, is an absolutely brilliant facility. I'm going to propose this. Do I have a seconder for this report?
Yeah, happy to second, and I think I'd like to move there after you said that. It was a good advert. Yeah, happy to second.
Yeah, it is a very nice area of the county. We've got a proposal, we've got a seconder. Unless anybody else wants just to speak, all those in favour? Thank you very much indeed. That's carried. Councillor Evans, you may now rejoin us. So moving on to item number 11, which is the thank you, Councillor Hignett. You may disappear back to work now. Moving on to item number 11, and before I move on, actually, I'm going to ask Eddie and Andy and Dan to come to the table so that when it comes to questions, etc., they're already in place rather than stopping me. Welcome, gentlemen. So item number 11 is the Ironbridge Gorge World Heritage. No, it's not this one, it's the next one. Ironbridge Gorge World Heritage Site. Just get this right. It is a supplementary planning document adoption. This document itself has been backwards and forwards with the local planning group, and I do want to thank the local plan group of members for the amount of work they've put into this, and also to thank the officers, because it's not a small document. I think it's fair to say, although it's not a bigger document as the item on the local plan. But if I just outline what exactly this covers. So the report is seeking approval to adopt the Ironbridge Gorge World Heritage Site supplementary planning document to provide guidance on the application of local plan policies and to form a material consideration in the planning application process. The Ironbridge Gorge covers 550 hectares, of which around 131, 23%, falls within Shropshire Council's administrative area. The remainder, of course, is in Telford and Wrekin. Reflecting this, the preparation of this draft SPD has been a joint effort between Shropshire Council and Telford and Wrekin Council. I'm going to open the floor up. I'm happy to propose this document. Do I have a seconder for that one? Can't remember who was seconding that. Was that you, Councillor Ian Nowens?
Councillor Ian Nowens, I'll second.
Okay, I'm quite happy to open this up for questions. I think actually, from a layman's point of view, which I absolutely am, I think this sets out some really good guidance for what happens in that area. It will be interesting to see how it impacts on the planning applications that we have coming forward in the near future for the former power station. But I'm quite happy to open up the floor to questions if anybody has any, because I'm sure the officers will be able to answer those. Thank you, Councillor Evans. Over to you.
It's just to say this is another report where there's been cross-party cooperation, and I see there's some already looking at it now, but congratulate the officers for enabling a cross-party group of councillors to have a look at it and come to agreement on it. So yeah, I echo your thoughts, and having worked on that site for over 20 years, I look forward to seeing how it develops.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Okay, I have a proposer, I have a seconder. All those in favour? Thank you very much indeed. Moving on to item number 12, which is the local plan examination of public response to inspectors, stage 1 interim findings. Councillor Rob Macy. Oh, bit of deja vu here, Rob. Oh, sorry, Councillor Cecilia. Yes.
You might be saying that in about 10 minutes as well.
Councillor Cecilia Motley is now leaving the room. She's we'll just wait till you disappear outside the door and then we'll kick on. Thank you, Rob.
Okay, thank you, Leader. So even given my previous portfolio holder position, I think this is probably the longest report I've probably brought to Cabinet, at least. So it's a bit of a lengthy introduction to this report, obviously, just so the public are clear on where we're going with this. And then obviously we've got officers at the table if there's any questions arising from this as well, because a lot of it is quite technical in nature and policy based. So the report is seeking the agreement of the proposed response alongside the associated supporting material to the stage 1 interim findings of the planning inspectors and taking the examination of the draft Shropshire local plan. Subject to this agreement, the report is also seeking approval to submit this material to the local plan examination, and if required, that public consultation be carried out on the new material in line with the Council's statement of community involvement. By way of brief background, and this is brief, the draft Shropshire local plan identifies a vision and framework for the future development of Shropshire to 2038, addresses needs and opportunities in relation to housing, the local economy, community facilities and infrastructure, and seeks to safeguard the environment, enable adaptation to climate change, and helps to secure high quality and accessible design. Following extensive public consultation and plan preparation, the draft Shropshire local plan was submitted for examination in September 2021. Following initial engagement with the planning inspector, stage 1 hearings occurred in July 2022 and January 2023. These focused on legal compliance, the duty to cooperate, and strategic policies. The planning inspectors subsequently issued their interim findings report on the issues addressed at the first stage hearings. This is provided as part of Appendix 1 of this report. These interim findings conclude the Council has met its legal duty to cooperate, which effectively means the planning inspectors are satisfied the Council has appropriately worked with neighbouring and closely related authorities in preparing the draft Shropshire local plan. They also conclude that the approach to local housing and employment land needs are satisfactory and have not requested that the Council reconsider proposed contributions in Shropshire to unmet housing and employment land needs forecast to arise in the Black Country. However, the planning inspectors did identify some areas where further work and additional main modifications are required before the examination proceeds. It should be stressed that this is not unusual and it is an important part of the examination process. The next stage of the process is therefore to respond to the planning inspector's interim findings. The proposed response forms are in Appendix 2 of the report. Subject to the submission of this response, the examination should be able to proceed to stage 2 hearings, which will likely address the detailed development management policies and the settlement strategies, including proposed site allocations. I'll just run through the key aspects of the planning inspector's interim findings and what we're proposing to respond with, although they are set out in full in Appendix 2. The need for further work, including an additional sustainability appraisal on housing and employment topic paper regarding the proposed housing and employment land requirements, specifically regarding their relationship to the proposed contributions to the Black Country. This necessary additional work has been undertaken and is provided at Appendices 3 and 4 of the report. The work has informed conclusions that the proposed housing requirement, which was 30,800 dwellings, employment land requirement 300 hectares, and the wider spatial strategy for Shropshire within the Shropshire Draft Local Plan remains appropriate, and as such it's considered no further site allocations are proposed at this stage. The need to identify specific sites, informed by additional sustainability appraisal, to accommodate proposed contributions to unmet needs forecast to arise within the Black Country. The necessary additional work has been undertaken and forms part of Appendix 3. In conclusion, 4 sites have been identified to accommodate the proposed contributions to the unmet needs. These are Tasley Garden Village and Bridgenorth, land east of Shifnal Industrial Estate, land between Mitton Oak Road and Hamwood Road, Shrewsbury, and the former Iron Bridge Power Station. It must be stressed there are no new proposed allocations and no additional dwellings or employment land included on any of those 4 sites. The need to specifically address housing needs of older people in Shropshire. As a result of a new draft policy, it's proposed to ensure appropriate housing is delivered to meet the needs of older people and those with disabilities and special needs in our communities. The development of this draft policy has been directly informed by the joint working between planning policy officers, adult social care officers and housing officers. The draft policy forms the appendix of the proposed response. There was also the further need for information on the viability and deliverability of the proposed strategic settlement at Clive Barracks Turnhill. Officers have liaised with the promoters of the site and prepared an addendum to the original statement of common ground, which specifically addresses the concern raised by the planning inspector and is included in Appendix 2. And the need to update the gypsy and traveller needs assessment. Officers have undertaken this update and endorses the proposed approach to meeting their needs, specifically that turnover on existing pitches is sufficient to meet the needs and no such specific allocations are required, but their policy mechanism is provided to meet emerging needs when required. This is explained within Appendix 2, and the further information on the proposed Greenbelt releases in the form of a new Greenbelt topic paper. Officers have accordingly prepared this document, which explains that the majority of proposed Greenbelt release are to safeguard land for future development beyond the draft Shropshire local plan. Of the remainder, the majority is for employment development, including the large strategic site at Shifnal, which will, in addition to meeting the local needs, accommodate the proposed employment land contribution to the Black Country. This forms Appendix 5. And there is also a need to update the local development scheme, which forms part of the project plan for production of planning policy documents. The updated draft local development scheme forms Appendix 6 of the report and envisages adoption of the draft Shropshire local plan in June 2024. Although it should be stressed, this continues to be dependent upon the timetable and conclusions of the examination process. And finally, you'll be glad to hear, Appendix 7 of this report captures all the proposed main modifications to the draft Shropshire local plan proposed today, include those resulting from the proposed response to the planning inspector's interim findings. And the importance of having an up-to-date local plan cannot be overemphasised. It forms a statutory responsibility for the council, and under government's plan-led approach development forms a key mechanism in providing a positive strategy to enable sustainable growth for Shropshire. The consequences of not having an up-to-date local plan are well known, including the associated risk of not being able to demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply and the consequent application of the presumption in favour of sustainable development. It is considered the proposed response to the interim findings of the inspectors will allow the examination to continue in a positive manner, and it is recommended for this to be approved. With that, I'll move the recommendations. Sorry.
Thank you. Do I have, is it me that's prepared seconding this? I think it is, yeah. I know I'm happy to second this report. I have to say, I sat down when the papers were presented on the internet, and I sat down, as I normally do, to read all of the cabinet papers, and I will openly admit that I have not read every single page of this, because this is an incredible amount of work from the officers, and I know that they are the ones that are responsible are actually sitting here today, so I take my hat off to you for the amount of this work that you've put into this, and because it is an incredibly important document, and that, you know, and hopefully we will get through, because I am very keen that we adopt our local plan as soon as practically possible. Councillor Dean, then Councillor Evans.
Thank you. I'd like to echo that. I'm sure that Councillor Evans will make the same point, but once again, this work was done in a cross-party fashion, which is great. Speaking as somebody who, you know, originally didn't support the local plan proposals anyway, I'm very pleased that what we have effectively, and I think this reassures the public, is we have officers and cross-party support to robustly and professionally and appropriately hold the line on numbers and sites across Shropshire. And so I at least welcome that, and thank the officers for their work.
Thank you, Councillor Dean. Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chairman. Echo those thoughts, and it is where cross-party cooperation can work, and for the volume of paper that is produced and the reports in it, nearly 1,500 pages, congratulate the officers, a small team of officers, on their work. Certain parts of the local plan I may disagree with, but overall I think this is a good report. It needs to go forward. My only concern is that 2038 is getting nearer every month, every week, and it's supposed to have a 15-year life. So I hope the planning inspectors do take it on board and come back fairly quickly. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Evans. I think one of my concerns is actually the speed at which the planning inspectorate, and that's not just relevant to us. I know other local authorities who are seriously behind their local plan timetable. It's not just us. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Don't go anywhere because we've still got one more report. But seriously, thank you very much. Yeah, but thank you very, very much for the amount of work that you've done on this. Rob is, I'm sure, happy to propose. Do you want to come back at all, Rob?
Yeah, and my only thing was to say it is that important that it has been cross-party. It has been officers and members working closely together from the very start before it was submitted and prepared, and that will continue. I've got no doubt through until adoption. But as you say, yes, the length of the process to produce a 15-year plan feels like 15 years at this stage, and it feels like it'll be a rolling thing as we go forward. So yeah,
absolutely. I have a proposer, I have a seconder. All those in favour? Thank you very, very much indeed. Thank you. So moving on to item number 13, which is the proposed designation of a conservation. Oh yes, should we get Councillor Motley back in? Thank you, Dean. So the proposed designation of a conservation area for West Felton, confirmation of design designation, following formal consultation. So I know that West Felton Parish Council will be extremely happy about this one. So like Rob, I'm just going to run through a few notes for you so that you understand and the public can understand exactly what is being asked here. So West Felton is a large village located in northwest Shropshire, divided into two parts because the A5 runs right through the centre of it. It does have historical significance, lots of it actually. Normans established a castle within the village and the mop, which is designated as a scheduled ancient monument. In November 2021, West Felton approached Shropshire Council with a request to designate a conservation area for the village based on research undertaken by an independent heritage consultant acting on their behalf. And they'd already held an exhibition on the consultant's work with their residents. Officers from Shropshire Council's Historic Environment team assessed the information provided and have worked in dialogue with the Parish Council to define this conservation area, which officers consider meets the relevant requirements set out in the National Planning Policy Framework and also Historic England guidance. Negotiations in this respect continued across the course of 2022. Officers subsequently defined a draft conservation area boundary based on the two cores of the village described above, which they considered to retain sufficient historic and architectural interest to merit designation. Both the portfolio holder and the local member were kept informed of progress with this work. We gave approval at Cabinet on 14th of December to undertake a formal consultation on the proposed conservation area with affected relevant statutory agencies and interested parties. The consultation ran from the 27th of January to the 20th February, and the responses are contained within the report. Following consideration of the consultation responses received, officers are now proposing that the conservation area is designated with an amended boundary that excludes a group of dwellings on Woolston Road on the southwestern side of the village. Some of the residents in this part of the village objected to their properties being included in the conservation area. Officers therefore reconsidered the existing character and appearance of this part of the village. On balance, they concluded that both infill development and alterations and extensions to the remaining older properties mean that they no longer possess sufficient architectural interest to justify inclusion in the conservation area. So approval is sought today from us to approve the designation of the conservation area with the amended boundary that has been defined following the formal consultation. Once again, the public had their say and we made changes, and we are listening. So I am really happy to support that report. Do I have a seconder for that, please?
Yeah, Councillor Ian Nellens, portfolio holder for climate change, environment and transport.
Thank you very much indeed. I have no hands. All those in favour? Thank you very much. Gentlemen, you are released. Thank you very much indeed, and I'm sure West Parish Council are going to be absolutely delighted. Okay, so moving on to, I think, which is the next item, which is the exclusion of press and public. I'm happy to propose that.
Councillor Nellens, I'll second.
Do I have a seconder? Oh, you do. Yeah. Yes, you do. Sorry. I was just looking over at Simon because I know Simon needs to disappear as well. So, wait for everybody to disappear and to give the signal that we are no longer live. And I will also be asking all the senior officers to leave us as well, please.